Good morning, and welcome to the 76th Annual Memorial Day Service at Arlington National Cemetery. My name is Turner Kobayashi, coordinator of this annual event. Each year, we gather here to honor those brave Japanese Americans that served our country and are now interred here. It began with members of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team in 1948 and continues to this day. It is the longest running service held by a non-government organization since its beginning. My father, Ki Kobayashi, started this service and chaired this event for the first 44 years, and I've had the honor to carry this tradition on with my family for the last 32 years. We come here to remember and honor those interred. We have seen our list grow to 123 sites, honoring 171 men and women interred here. It is our hope that this service also helps unify our community and nation as it reminds us of the importance of coming and working together to achieve our greater goals. We are fortunate and appreciative to be here today. Please let me introduce the leaders of our sponsoring organizations to welcome us. First, Kazuma Parkinson, member of the Japanese American Citizens League, DC chapter.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kazuma Parkinson, and I'm honored to speak on behalf of the Washington, D.C. chapter of the Japanese American Citizens League. Thank you to Turner and the Kobayashi family for hosting this important event which honors fallen Japanese American veterans and their legacies. Additionally, thank you to Mr. Geis, Soren, the student speaker, and the co-sponsors of this event. This year's theme is Remembering, Honoring, Unifying. I would like to focus on these three words. Recently, at my parents' home in Pittsburgh, I saw Tom Brokaw's audiobook, The Greatest Generation Speaks. Many of whom we are honoring today are part of this greatest generation who served during World War II. Those we are commemorating can no longer speak to us directly, but today we remember and honor these heroes who paved the way for future generations. The last word of today's theme, unifying, is one of the most timely and salient lessons demonstrated by Japanese American veterans. Today, we live in a polarized, divided nation. Americans are divided on domestic and international conflicts and a looming election. However, inspiration can be taken from the Japanese American soldiers we honor today. 125,000 Japanese Americans were wrongfully incarcerated during World War II, losing their possessions, privacy, liberties, and self-determination. Despite this injustice, approximately 33,000 Japanese Americans served in World War II, many of whom were part of the most decorated military units in American history. They fought a war against the enemy and against racism in the U.S. and won. These heroes were united in their efforts to create a better world for future generations. As we remember and honor fallen veterans today and every day from all conflicts, I hope Americans can take inspiration from these Japanese American heroes and try our best to unite, to challenge injustices, improve the places we call home, and seek a just peace. Thank you very much.
I'd like to introduce Howard High, president of the Japanese American Veterans Association.
Today, we honor the brave souls who have served our nation with unwavering dedication. This day reminds us of the sacrifices to protect our freedoms in the way of life. We pay special tribute to World War II Nisei soldiers. Despite facing discrimination and unconstitutional conditions, they served with unparalleled courage and patriotism. Their story is one of the incredible bravery and an enduring spirit. These soldiers faced prejudice at home, but fought bravely in Europe and the Pacific. Their actions exemplify honor, duty, proving their commitment to justice and freedom. The Nisei soldiers, amidst division and discrimination, showed us the power of unity in standing together for a common cause. Their resilience and dedication inspire us to uphold the values of justice, honor, and unity. As we reflect on their legacy, let us always remember their extraordinary bravery and unbreakable spirit. By honoring their memory, we affirm our commitment to ensuring their legacy endures for future generations. Today we pledge to remember these heroes and honor their sacrifice by fostering unity and upholding the principles they fought to protect. Their story reminds us of what we can achieve when we all reunite as one nation. May we never forget the courage and sacrifice of these safe soldiers. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Carolyn Hoover, board member of the National Japanese American Memorial Foundation.
The United States has always been the dream of the world, the big what if. We don't pledge allegiance to a person, we pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. We don't just fight for our country, we fight to support and defend our Constitution and the principles that it was built on. This is what unites us all. On Memorial Day, we remember not just those who have died while serving the U.S., but also the values they gave their lives to protect. I have the honor of being here today as a board member of ANJMF to represent the National Japanese American Memorial to Patriotism located down the road in Washington, D.C. Preserved for posterity on the panels of our beautiful memorial are the names of more than 800 Nisei men who during World War II made the ultimate sacrifice in the service of their country, while other Japanese Americans and people of Japanese ancestry were incarcerated back home. Many of them served for the legendary combined 100th Battalion and 442nd Regimental Combat Team, or the Military Intelligence Service. Only days after war broke out in 1941, hundreds of Japanese American draftees, already in U.S. Army uniform, were discharged without explanation other than that it was for the convenience of the government. At the same time, the draft status of every Nisei civilian was changed automatically to aliens, ineligible for military service, despite their U.S. citizenship. But in one sector, pragmatism prevailed. A handful of Nisei with a working knowledge of the Japanese language had been training to become combat intelligence specialists. In June of 1942, even as their families were being imprisoned, some of these Nisei specialists were rushed to the Aleutians to help repel a Japanese invasion. They proved to be so valuable that the Army brass took notice and the prison camps were scoured for additional linguists. But so Americanized were the Nisei that only a limited number could meet the Army's requirement of fluency. Ironically, the best linguists were Kibe, Nisei who had received some of their education in Japan and therefore had been previously considered to be the most likely to be disloyal to the U.S. Again, the government could not have been more wrong. The Nisei and the Hawaiian National Guard were able to stay in service. They became the 100th Battalion and performed so well in training that the Army accelerated its plans for another unit of Japanese Americans to be designated as the 442nd. The Army looked to Hawaii to fill out the ranks of the 442nd. When the regiment finally joined the 100th Infantry Battalion, they were involved in 25 days of nearly continuous action in rain and raw cold. It was in this battle that the Nisei rescued the Texas Lost Battalion, trapped by the Germans, losing more men in the efforts than were saved. In all, the 100th and 442nd paid a terrible price in the Vosges, suffering 814 casualties, which is 1 out of every 5 men, including 140 dead, while taking every objective. During this bloody 3.5-day weeks of action, the 100th and 442nd won 5 of its 7 presidential unit citations. In all, the 100th and 442nd fought in 7 campaigns in 2 countries. Their members were awarded 18,143 individual citations. And in 2010, the Japanese American World War II veterans of the 100th Infantry Battalion, the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, and the Military Intelligence Service were awarded the Congressional Gold Medal, the most prestigious award given to civilians in the United States. And the 442nd Regiment has been recognized as the most decorated in American history. My grandfather and other members of my family served in these units and are buried here in in this cemetery. I actually remember his service right here very distinctly, and it's very apparent to me that my generation is the beneficiary of countless sacrifices. My grandparents have always nurtured and instilled in me the responsibility to shape the world in the vision of equality and justice. The legacy of our lost military members lives on through us, and that is a privilege and honor that we all must take greatly. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce David Inoue, Executive Director of the Japanese American Citizens League National. Thank you.
Thank you, Turner, and thank you for your family's leadership in producing this event for so many years. Thank you also to Java, to NJAF, and of course our DC chapter for joining us in putting on this. As we think about the theme for today, remembering, honoring, and unifying, I think about it in the context of our Nisei soldiers and their role in history, particularly as we are in May, which is Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander Month, where we look back and look at our heritage as Asian Americans throughout this country. But our Japanese American story is so much a part of that, but it is also just one part of that thread that goes back as far as, particularly in service, even back to the Revolutionary War, where the first Asian Americans served in the military, continuing on through the Civil War. And obviously we have our current veterans as well today. And we also think about those particularly today who have lost their lives. As we think about our place in history, particularly think about how are we unifying, and particularly as an Asian American community, and what is our role as Japanese Americans in that. Today, Japanese Americans perhaps don't experience the same levels of discrimination that some other communities do. But we have experienced the worst of that as Americans, as citizens, and despite the fact that we are citizens. That means that it is our responsibility to take that story of our veterans who served so honorably despite what was happening to us at that time, but really rose to the true ideals of our country, and to use that to lift up other communities that face discrimination today. It is in that sense that we do remember, that we honor, and we do seek to bring unity to this country. So please join me today as we do remember those who gave the ultimate sacrifice for our country and for those values that sometimes have failed us, but we try to uplift every day. Thank you.
Thank you. Also here today, we have some special guests. First, I'd like to acknowledge Principal James Sweeney from the Spark Matsunaga Elementary School. We appreciate your support and of our program by having a student speak from your school every year. Also, we have Commander Chochi Todu from the Japanese Coast Guard. He's assigned to the Japanese Embassy with his family. Each year, we select a Japanese American veteran that is interred here, and we'd like to share a little bit about that man or woman with you. We are very fortunate today to honor a great man, Thomas Kuge, Private First Class, United States Army, 442nd Regimental Combat Team. He is interred in Section 34 here at the cemetery. His niece from Michigan, Marie, will speak later in the program on behalf of their family. With her today is her husband, Christian Beltrami, her daughters, Jasmine and Alexandra, her brother, Robert Kuge, his wife, Linnea, and daughter, Corinne, and her cousin, Carol Kawamura, and her son, Kaleo, in from California. Not able to make it today is Maria and Robert's father, Chose Kuge, the younger brother of Private First Class Thomas Kuge. Chose has been a longtime supporter of Java, working on various veteran projects, and a close friend of Terry Shima. At this time, I'd like to ask Janice Nakano-Fadden to introduce today's student speaker.
It is my pleasure. But first I want to welcome everyone who has joined us here today, and especially a welcome to the veterans, their spouses, their families, and those of our fallen heroes. This special Memorial Day, as Turner said, has been held for 76 consecutive years, Even during COVID, we wore our masks and we stayed steadfast to this tradition. We thank Turner Kobayashi's father, Ki, who initiated this tradition, and in 1948, and Turner for assuming the lead for his family in 1993. In 2012, something that Turner did not mention, although the date where the Kobayashi family had a vision, and their vision was to look across generations. To look across generations and provide in this ceremony a perspective on sacrifices from past generations, of calls to action for our current generation, and of aspirations of generations yet to come. To that end, one or more students from Spark M. Matsunaga Elementary School are traditionally included as guest speakers in this Memorial Day service. Why students from Spark M. Matsunaga Elementary School? The school is named after Spark M. Matsunaga, a distinguished Japanese American who served as captain of the 100th Infantry Battalion, U.S. Congressman, and United States Senator. Before I introduce our guest speaker, Soren Wilkes, I would like to recognize his family members who are here with us today. First of all, Soren's father. Would you stand for a minute? Brady Wilkes. He's communications manager for the Warrior Canine Connection organization, and more in a few minutes about a canine who is with us here today. Soren's mother, Lori Wilkes, art teacher in Montgomery County Public Schools, and also with him are aunt and uncle, Bobby Prue and John Prue. Welcome. And finally, as I said before, a special family member who is a retired service dog adopted by Soren and his family. She helped returning warriors reconnect with life, with their families, with their communities, and with each other. Rossi has touched the lives of an estimated 60 wounded warriors, providing them with therapy and a sense of purpose upon their return to their country. I'm not going to ask Rossi to stand. Rossi is lying very quietly and obediently well trained. Soren Wilkes, a fifth grader at Matsunaga Elementary School, is an accomplished student in a rigorous academic program. He loves art, coding, music, game design, reading, climbing trees, hunting fossils, and generally being outdoors. When describing Soren, besides his academic accomplishments and a variety of interests, his parents and school staff point to his character. He shows constantly empathy for others whenever they need help. His parents highlight his sense of humor and ability to laugh at himself. Soren's future goals: he wants to make a difference in the world. And you will see what I mean when you listen to his words as he speaks right now. Soren Wilkes.
Good morning. My name is Soren Gray Wilkes, and I am a 5th grade student at Spark M. Matsunaga Elementary School in Germantown, Maryland. I would like to thank everyone at Matsunaga Elementary School, especially our principal, Mr. Sweeney, who is with us here today. Thank you for believing in me and honoring me with the opportunity to speak here at today's Memorial Day ceremony, as we consider this year's theme, Remembering, Honoring, Unifying. On behalf of all of us at Matsunaga Elementary, I would like to thank our amazing sponsors, the Japanese American Veterans Association, the Japanese American Citizens League, the Japanese American Citizens League GDC chapter, the National Japanese American Memorial Foundation, and a very special thanks to the Kobayashi family. Thank you all so much for your ongoing support. And of course, before I begin, I would like to recognize and honor any service members and veterans that may be with us here today. Thank you for all your courageous service to our country. Memorial Day is a holiday to honor and remember the men and women who have made the ultimate sacrifice while serving in the military. Memorial Day is a day to say their names and tell their stories. It is a time to recognize their bravery and dedication in preserving the freedoms we enjoy. According to our government's records, more than 650,000 members of the United States Armed Forces have lost their lives amid a military conflict, and this only includes data from after World War I. Every one of those service members deserves to be mentioned today, but I would like to share a name that is meaningful for me, United States Army Major Marie Rossi. She was the first female commander to fly behind enemy lines and was tragically killed in a helicopter crash just one day after a ceasefire. While overseas and just before her death, she told a reporter that her biggest fear was not death. Instead, it was the fear that she might be letting her brothers and sisters down. Why is this woman who died 20 years before I was even born significant for me? There's a dog named in her honor who I get to call family. WCC's Rossi has over 5,000 hours of benefiting veterans and service members battle their invisible wounds. The lucky part for me is that she gets to sleep at my house, and I'm fortunate to have her in my life. I look forward to walking her over to Section 8, right here in Arlington National Cemetery, where we will pay respects at Major Rossi's marker, taking a picture of my dog at her marker, and sharing it with the women who served with Major Rossi is my way of honoring her. Speaking of honor, you may have heard or seen something about poppies, a beautiful flower, or you may have heard of the Poppy Wall in our nation's capital. The Poppy Wall is a memorial that commemorates fallen U.S. service members. It features over 650,000 red poppies, each representing a fallen American service member since World War I. The tradition of using poppies as a symbol of remembrance for fallen soldiers originated in the poem In Flanders Fields and represents both the sacrifices of war and the hope for peace. Whether it is a poppy or any other flower placed in remembrance of a loved one, it is an honored tradition and often placed alongside small American flags. When thinking of our flag, I believe it's the best example of unity. This is the United States of America. I may only be 10, but I have listened and seen enough on the news and in the headlines to know that our nation is divided over many issues. While I don't fully understand these issues, I feel confident that, despite our many differences, we as Americans have a unifying gratitude for our service members and the freedoms they fight to defend for all of us. This will be 156 years of our United States of America coming together in honor of our fallen soldiers on Memorial Day. I hope that as we spend this Memorial Day weekend with family and friends, we will remember that this is not simply a weekend for cookouts, discounts, or shopping, but we will also to honor those who made the greatest sacrifice for our nation. All gave some, and on this day we recognize those that gave all. Thank you.
Sorry. please stay here. Janice would like to present you something.
Two things, actually. The first thing is a certificate of appreciation, Soren, which says, presented to Soren Wilkes, Spark M. Matsunaga Elementary School, for presenting remarks at the 76th Annual Memorial Day Service, remembering, honoring, and unifying at Arlington National Cemetery, May 26th, 2024. Thank you so much for honoring us with your words and wisdom. Here is the second piece, a gift with a tsuru folded origami on top. So please take it as a gift of appreciation from all of us here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Soren. Oops. Thank you, Soren. Did we lose it? Hello? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Soren. I think we can all learn a lot from you, and I can't wait to see what you code. So, at this time, I'd like to ask Howard Hyde to come forward, the president of Java, to introduce our keynote speaker.
That's good.
Trying to fit it in here.
Doesn't fit.
It was in there earlier.
Okay.
I was in a band once.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Gotta force it, huh? Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, it came off. This is staying very well. Okay. Is audio here? Our hero. Clean? I won't touch it. Okay. All right, it is good now. Very good. It is my pleasure to introduce Sergeant First Class John Geis, U.S. Army retired. He's a retired Special Forces NCO. So he's been there and done that. But what's really impressive in the more recent time is that he has been working to develop the Wall of Spies museum, basically, for the last 7 years at the Intelligence Community Campus in Bethesda. And he has a lot of great information. I'm proud to call him my friend. And I don't want to take much time. I want him to talk right now, but he has so much to share with you today. John, please.
Thank you, Howard. First and foremost, I have to shake your hand. I have some big shoes to follow. I want to thank Howard and Java members for the opportunity to speak in front of you. Like I said, I have some big shoes to follow, and hopefully I'll match what Soren had. We got a lot to talk about, so I'm going to go through it and dive into it quick. And talking about the themes of remembering, I'm going to talk about the remembering of how this great land that we're on now, this hallowed ground, got created and its intersection with Memorial Day, or what we're celebrating now. We'll talk about the first Japanese Americans that are buried here, how they got here. And then I'm going to talk about, talking from the side of unification, unifying in with memorials themselves, two incredible United States Army military intelligence service units that fought in World War II. The Ritchie boys, who worked in the European theater, and the Miss Nisei, who worked in the Pacific theater, how we can honor them even further than what we are doing now. But let me dive into the first theme of how this great land got created, how this great cemetery got created. If I may. So, 1799, George Washington passes away. In 1802, his step-grandson, George Washington Parke Custis, wants to establish a memorial for him and builds what you will know as Lee House, the Lee House on Arlington Cemetery. The land would be called the Arlington State before it gets the Lee House, but it gets that name, Lee House, starting in 1831 when George Washington Parke Custis's daughter marries Robert E. Lee, Lieutenant Robert E. Lee. In 1857, George Washington Parke Custis dies and passes on Arlington Estate to his daughter, and in essence, Robert E. Lee becomes the caretaker of Arlington State. In April 1601, the Civil War breaks out. A month later, Union forces realize that they need to take that high ground where Lee House is, because if the Confederates had put artillery on there, they could decimate Washington, D.C. So the Army takes control of Lee House early in the war. And when the Army takes control of it, they actually establish 3 forts on Arlington Estate. One of the forts is called Fort Whipple, of which would be called Fort Myer eventually. Early on, Fort Whipple, and then Fort Myer. In 1862, 1863, casualties are building up in the Civil War. And the United States Army had 2 national cemeteries at the time, Alexandria National Cemetery and Soldiers National Cemetery up by Lincoln Cottage. Those cemeteries were overflowing, so the Army needed additional space to bury its troops, and the ordnance under the lead of Major General Ordnance Department, which oversaw all the burials, under the leadership of Major General Montgomery Meigs, decides to turn Arlington Estate into a cemetery. A little bit about Montgomery Meigs. Montgomery Meigs was a West Point graduate engineer by training, and prior to the war, he got involved in many engineering projects that you probably know. The Washington Aqueduct, the Cabin John Large Arch, he built that. He also helped finish the Capitol building. And then he would build, in memory for the soldiers after the war, the pension building very close on F Street, 401 F Street, close to the Capitol building, where soldiers would go for pension, their retiree benefits, which is now called the Architect Museum. But it's an extraordinary building, a city block long, worth visiting if you have not been there. In June of 1863, the Army also decides to accept on the Lee property, on Arlington Estate property, former slaves, former enslaved persons. Keep in mind that in 1862, slavery had been prohibited in Washington, D.C., and that, of course, the Emancipation Proclamation that went into effect in January 1st, 1863, there were a lot of former enslaved persons living in the D.C. area. The Army brings those enslaved persons on this land we are now and creates a freedom village. On May 14th, May 14th, 1864, the first United States Army soldier is buried here on this property. He was a transplant. In other words, he had died somewhere before and then was brought to the cemetery. His name was Private William Christman, a volunteer from Pennsylvania, volunteered actually in March 1864, and he dies of rubella and then gets buried here. He's in Section 27, which is close to the Iwo Jima Memorial entrance. The first American soldier to die as a casualty of war was Private William Blatt. He was killed in action in May of 1864 in the Battle of Wilderness, and the two of them are buried together in Section 27. The dates are kind of mysterious, still trying to get it exactly, but at some point, Major General Montgomery Meigs will bury Union soldiers directly around the Lee House. And if you go to the Lee House now, you will see headstones in file around the garden. And Montgomery Meigs did that, and the time frame is June to October 1864, not clear yet, but he wanted to make sure that the Lees could not return to their property. That's why he put those bodies there. He lost his son in the Shenandoah Valley, and he blamed the death of his son on Robert E. Lee, and that was his payback for the killing of his son during the war. So those stones are still there, you can see. The intersection of Arlington National Cemetery with Memorial Day, which we are celebrating now. So after the war, there was a tradition, we've heard this spoken before, of placing flowers on graves. And in 1868, a veterans organization called the Grand Army of the Republic, about at its height, it would be 400,000 strong. How would you like to have that, Howard, as far as veterans numbers? And the commander, actually called the commander-in-chief, or CINC at the time, name in 1868, name was John Blackjack Logan. John Blackjack Logan was a former Civil War political general who, for a political general, fought pretty well in the Civil War. He became the Grand Army Republic's third CINC, commander-in-chief, and he determines in 1868 that he would make May 30th of every year a Decoration Day. Memorial Day is initially called Decoration Day, where we would celebrate formally the sacrifice of American soldiers. The first celebration of Memorial Day is 1868 on Arlington National Cemetery. Appropriate. In 1873, there would be a much larger celebration behind the Lee House in what is called the Tanner Amphitheater, and attending that celebration would be former General, current United States President Ulysses S. Grant, along with Blackjack Logan, General Blackjack Logan. That becomes the tradition of presidents speaking in the amphitheater, the newer amphitheater, to this day. Just want to mention, it's called the Tanner Amphitheater. Tanner has an extraordinary story. He was a Civil War soldier, wounded in the Second Battle of Manassas, lost both his legs. On April 14th of 1865, Abraham Lincoln is in Ford's Theater and he's shot. He's brought across the street to the Peterson House. And Tanner, Private Tanner, Corporal Tanner, happened to be in the area at the time. They were looking for a note taker. somebody to take notes about what was happening there. Secretary Stanton took charge, and Tanner was the note taker for that event. He would go on in 1905 and 1906 to be a SINC, a commander-in-chief of the Grand Army of the Republic. That's how he gets a amphitheater named after him. Okay, just one comment to make things a little bit more confusing. When I went, it was May 14th, I went to the ceremony honoring the 106th anniversary of the first burial of William Christman. And at that ceremony, the Army historians, the Army runs the cemetery, the National Park Service runs the Lee House. Army historians mentioned, well, a National Park Service ranger just discovered that the first burial might not indeed been the first burial, William Christman's, but in fact, there was a burial here in February of 1862 of a soldier who was stationed on Fort Whipple, who died of disease. Soldier was from the 2nd Wisconsin, the famous Iron Brigade, and he was actually buried here in 1862. Well, that's kind of throw every history into disarray and has to be investigated. How the National Park Ranger found this out, to his credit, he went through obituaries from the 1860s in Wisconsin and found out that the private was buried here at Arlington. So there might be some changing of really who was the first person buried here at Arlington in the coming days. All right, that's the history of Arlington National Cemetery in short, and the connection with Memorial Day. Let me move on to honoring. So, as I mentioned before, there are 171 Japanese Americans who are buried here. But I want to talk about or honor the first 2 Japanese Americans who are buried here. And I apologize beforehand if I get any pronunciations wrong. The first 2 were PFC Fumitake Nagato and Suburo Tanamachi of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team. They were both killed in action, and we heard the stories told before of this action, in late October 1944, trying to rescue that lost Texas battalion, which, once again, those extraordinary numbers that more soldiers were killed in the rescue than were actually rescued. There were 442nd killed and 186 of the Texas battalion rescued. Just extraordinary, the heroism of the 442nd at that time. When Private First Class Nagato was killed, his parents and siblings, as the wind took away my brief and lost my place, were interned in the Colorado River internment camp. They read about their son's death in the camp newspaper. I cannot imagine anything more horrific for them to have been formed in that way. I just cannot imagine anything more horrific. The parents would go on to become United States citizens in 1955. And then in 1966, they would give another son to American freedom and lose their son, Sergeant Yoshiwa Namato, in Vietnam. He is buried in the Punch Bowl in Hawaii. Both privates they had been buried initially in France. They were reinterred on Arlington National Cemetery in Section 12 on June 4th, 1948. It's worth noting the celebration that they received and who were some of the pallbearers for that event. The Chief of Army Chaplains oversaw the burial. 4 members of Congress, 1 4-star general, former commander of the 6th Army Group, who had overseen the 442nd Regimental Combat Team, 4 major generals, and to me, one of the most interesting individuals at that ceremony was the former head of the War Relocation Authority, Dylan Meyer. Dylan Meyer oversaw the internment of over 120,000 persons of Japanese descent in the internment camps. I guess he had a guilty conscience and had some remorse. Yeah. Time. I'm sorry. Oh, okay. All right. Lastly, Private Tamauchi, buried close to Private First Class Namato. He would win the Silver Star for his actions. And interesting that his actions, one of his fellow soldiers, a Private George Sakato, when Tamauchi was mortally wounded, George Sakato went to his assistance. He would die in his hands. Private Sakato would retrieve from him a silver dollar, something that he knew he treasured, and would eventually give that to his parents. He would also, enraged for the death, infuriated by the loss of his good friend, and impervious to enemy fire, he would go on a tear of German positions, ultimately leading to him winning the Medal of Honor. All right, I understand I've got short of time, so I need to, I want to just close out. And I want to close out with a vision I have. As Howard mentioned, I've been studying and researching intelligence for the United States government now for 7 years. And I'm working on World War II now. And doing the research, I came in understanding of 2 incredible United States Army Military Intelligence Service units. 2 units, as you all know, did not get the appropriate recognition that they deserved for what they did in World War II, helping the United States Army in both the European theater and the Pacific theater win the war. I am proposing in my private capacity that memorials be built to these 2 units. And my preferred location for that would be Arlington National Cemetery. After all we've heard and after all we've seen, after all we're doing here, it is only appropriate that this be the location. And the options for those burials is the Memorial Avenue, called Avenue of Heroes, where the Seabees Monument is now. That would be ideal land for speaking memorials, where people can go and learn about what these 2 units did. Or on the cemetery proper, and that is limited to 18-inch memorials. Either one would be good, either one would be appropriate to remember these 2 units. And I'm looking at working with JAVA, under Howard's leadership, the Jewish War Veterans, and the Special Forces Association, Chapter 11, all have interest in supporting this endeavor, and hopefully we can get that done. With that, I will close my remarks.
Thank you very much, John. I know that you stay here. I know that Arlington National Cemetery means a lot to you. He's a historian, and he's in a holograph for everybody. And thank you for mentioning about the monument that we're working on. It's deserved, definitely. And our appreciation, we'd like to present to you this for you. And Floyd.
Oh my God.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you enough. Thank you. Thank you. Come on.
Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to ask Marie Cougue, niece of Private First Class Thomas Cougue, 442nd Regimental Combat Team, to come up and give a special tribute. Marie?
Good morning and thank you. My name is Marie Cougue. Last year, Terry Shima asked my father, Jose Cougue, to participate in today's tribute to his older brother. Unfortunately, he's unable to join us today, but it is an honor to speak on my father's behalf about his older brother, my uncle, Thomas Tamatsu Cougue. Thomas Tamatsu Cougue, or Tom as he was called, was born on May 23, 1923, in Bridal Veil, Oregon, to Gisaburo and Takaya Cougue, who had immigrated to Oregon from Japan in 1910. He was the fourth oldest of 8 siblings. The family lived in the timber forest of Oregon, where his father and oldest brother worked for the local lumber company, and where Tom learned to hunt and fish. During the Depression, he raised rabbits. The family moved to Portland around 1938, where his parents ran a small grocery and produced fresh tofu and udon noodles. Here, Tom attended Benson Polytechnic High School, participated in several clubs, and graduated with excellent grades from the technical electrical program in June 1941. I don't have information on Tom's post-high school plans, but they certainly did not include Japan attacking Pearl Harbor that December, or that he and his family members would be considered such a security risk to their country they required separation under armed guard. But in May 1942, less than a year after his high school graduation, Tom and his family were given a week to report to the Portland Assembly area, a converted livestock pavilion, and quite smelly, as my father would say, where they waited several months before being assigned and moved to the Tule Lake internment camp. For context, the oldest brother, Yutaka, was 29 at the time, Toshi was 23, the sister Kia was 21, Tom himself was 19, Chose, my father, was 12 years old, Seiji was 10, and Kingo was 8. Sometime early in 1943, adult internees responded to the infamous loyalty questionnaire. Questions 27 asked if you were willing to serve in the U.S. military, and question 28 asked you to forswear all allegiance to Japan. My father wasn't privy to this grown-up discussion, but was aware of arguments amongst the adult family members over how to respond. Was there a question of loyalty? He would later recognize the complexity of these questions because his parents and his sister were born in Japan. So by the law of that time, they were prohibited U.S. citizenship. By answering yes, yes, they would be without a country. And how could his brothers forswear an allegiance they never had? But in the end, the family united. I didn't realize that was a theme this year, but they united in answering yes, yes, determined to stay together and hoping they would not be permanently assigned to the high-risk camp that Tule Lake had become. Meanwhile, across the country, the war effort led to a labor shortage crisis in many job sectors. The University of Michigan was among employers that filled their critical workforce needs with Japanese American people incarcerated in wartime internment camps. As a result, on May 25, 1943, Tom was authorized to leave Tule Lake to work at the University of Michigan Hospital in Ann Arbor. Letters to his sister say he mostly sleeps, eats, and works, but no mention of the specific job. He sends money for Family Matters, reminding his sister to spend a little something special for the kids. Don't forget to buy a mitt, a ball, and a bat. A month later, on June 28, 1943, Tom's older brother Toshi left Tule Lake as a volunteer for the 442nd. The following spring, Yutaka and Tom were drafted into the U.S. Army. Tom earned a sharpshooter marksmanship badge in basic training and became a Browning automatic rifleman. The 442nd was in southern France from November 23, 1944 until March 15, 1945, rebuilding strength after suffering enormous casualties in Bruges. Tom was among those 382 much-needed replacements. During this time, Tom reunites briefly with his older brother Toshi before heading off for combat in Italy. On April 22nd, 1945, K Company, 3rd Battalion of the 442nd Regimental Combat Team launched an attack on the village of Tendola in the Po Valley, which lasted all day and into the night. In this firefight, at age 22, Private First Class Thomas Tamatsu Kuge was killed in action. The following day, the German defenders pulled out, starting a retreat that would end with Germany's surrender. On May 8, 1945, little more than 2 weeks after Tom was killed in action, the war in Europe ended. Tom received the Purple Heart. He was buried in the U.S. military cemetery at Castelfiorentino, and later and on March 28, 1949, was reinterred at Arlington National Cemetery. When I first started thinking about what I would say in this tribute, I thought I'd have no problem staying within the 5 to 10 minute allotment. Not that my father avoided talking about his brother or the war, as so many internees. Growing up, we visited Tom's grave. We watched the specials about the 442nd. When I was older, I joined my father in Hawaii for the 442nd 60-year reunion. It was 2003, and he was searching for more information on Tom's service and death, and maybe someone who knew him. Little was known. We met Harold Hariuchi. Harold never met him, but said that Tom was his replacement. What more could be said? We met Henry Shibata, who shared a photograph captioned, "Kuge, barman unequaled, took out 3 machine gun nests before they got him." Beyond that, I knew little except that Tom was Dad's favorite. Of course he was. But then these past months, and I'll admit it last this past week, I went down so many rabbit holes and I learned so much from it. For example, John Tobey shared Tom's bio prepared by the sons and daughters of the 442nd. Tons of info, perfect. I shared it with my cousin Carol here, and she says, "I don't think he went to Michigan for college." So, Google, and I found a whole history from the U of M about internees that worked at the university during World War II. How at the same time Japanese Americans were not allowed admission, conditions of the time, a study in the generational impact of wartime incarceration, and so on. And I reflect on the connections with Tom's life. One question folds into another, transforming like a sort of origami. I stumble across a bio that my father wrote about Tom with information I did not previously know, and listened to his interview with the National Park Service for Tule Lake. Read military accounts, books, websites, reviewed letters and photos that Tom sent to his family. I find holes in a story and try to connect the threads, mend discrepancies, finding more significance along the way. Tom's life was short, but he left a long legacy. After the war, his parents and brothers and sister would move and spread out across the country to Chicago, Milwaukee, Los Angeles, Stockton, Washington, D.C., Hawaii, Knox, Indiana, and elsewhere. Some would marry and raise children, and some of those children would raise their own children. There was a doctor dedicated to his family, community, and bowling league, an artist and teacher dedicated to restoring lives in a boys' correctional facility, a retiree volunteering to archive the Japanese American story, a widowed sister elected to serve her small farming community, a brother who would bring the family together in celebration from across the country. There was sadness and struggles as well, and this is a very incomplete picture of the legacy of one very short life. There will be omissions and errors in my story and in my acknowledgments, because there's not one word of this tribute that hasn't been touched by many hands, lifted up, stitched together, strained, and mended. So this tribute must be dedicated to everyone who has contributed their lives and their stories to this history, especially the veterans and current military service members and their families. It must be dedicated to the people who have documented these stories, and there's so many, to the people and organizations who ensure that these stories are heard, including those here today, the Japanese American Veterans Association, the Japanese American Citizens League, the National Japanese American Memorial Foundation, and to the Kobayashi family who have continued this memorial for 76 years. And finally, to the people who care to listen and learn and preserve those stories, the great nieces and nephews, the caring neighbor, the reflective student, and all of you who have taken the time to join us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Could you please introduce your family as well and that are here? They came from so far away.
Yeah, so my cousin Carol, you can stand up.
All the way from California.
Kaleo's in the back there. My brother Robert, standing next to Kaleo. His wife Linnea, Corinne. And then, where's my family? My husband, Christian Beltrame. Oh, way over there. And my daughters, watch me forget my
Okay, good.
Jasmine and Alexandra. That's my husband.
Okay, at this time I'd like Michelle Amano, JACL DC board member, to come and recite the Japanese American Creed.
I am proud that I'm an American citizen of Japanese ancestry, for my very background makes me appreciate more fully the wonderful advantages of this nation. I believe in her institutions, ideals, and traditions. I glory in her heritage. I boast of her history. I trust in her future. She has granted me liberties and opportunities such as no individual enjoys in this world today. She has given me an education befitting kings. She's entrusted me with the responsibilities of the franchise. She's permitted me to build a home, to earn a livelihood, to worship, think, speak, and act as I please, as a free man equal to every other man. Although some individuals may discriminate against me, I shall never become bitter or lose faith, for I know that such persons are not representative of the majority of the American people. True, I shall do all in my power to discourage such practices, but I shall do it in the American way, above board, in the open, through courts of law, by education, by proving myself to be worthy of equal treatment and consideration. I am firm in my belief that American sportsmanship and attitude of fair play will judge citizenship and patriotism on the basis of action and achievement and not on the basis of physical characteristics. Because I believe in America and I trust she believes in me, and because I have received innumerable benefits from her, I pledge myself to do honor at all times and in all places, to support her Constitution, to obey her laws, to respect her flag, to defend her against all enemies, foreign or domestic, to actively assume my duties and obligations as a citizen cheerfully, and without any reservations whatsoever, in the hope that I may become a better American and a greater America.
That was written by Michelle's grandfather, Mike Masoka, and we have had the honor of Michelle reciting that for the last 32 years. So thank you, Michelle, very much. At this time, I'd like to ask all veterans and active service members to come up, introduce yourself, and then we will stand for the playing of taps. So please.
Howard High, U.S. Army veteran.
John Geis, United States Army.
Mike Parkinson, U.S. Air Force retiree.
Frank Nicoba, retired United States Air Force.
Gerald Yamada, U.S. Army.
Kenta Tanaka, U.S. Army Reserves.
Craig Hirai, United States Army.
Mike Katahara, United States Navy, retired.
Mark Dotgal, U.S. Army, Hood.
Justin Inomiya, U.S. Army.
Al Ghoshi, U.S. Army.
You all line up in this group, please, right here. We're going to turn and face. So please rise for the playing of taps. Okay, a few announcements. I'd like to thank the Arlington National Cemetery and their support staff for allowing us to do this, especially Mike Hill, if he's present. We appreciate it, Mike. Thank you very much for your assistance. Also, the Allen Woods florist. We have all these beautiful flowers and this beautiful wreath arrangement. This wreath will be presented at the Kuge site today. Also, on a personal note, I'd like to thank the Japanese American Veterans Association. This year in February, I accepted on behalf of my family the Java Legacy Award, which is a tremendous honor for our family. Gerald and Howard, thank you very much. It means so much to us, so thank you. Another announcement, I've asked to mention the JACL DC Picnic. It'll be Sunday, June 9th from 12 to 2:30 at the Kevin John Group Picnic area. Are there any other announcements that anyone would like to come up and share with us at this moment? Okay, what we're going to do now is this concludes the formal part of our program. We're going to now do our gravesite visitations, and as you know, we have 123 sites with 171 that we would like to honor with these beautiful flowers. There's 70 in this columbarium and niche area. So at that, what we'll do is my brother Baylor and my nephew Matt will be down here, and you can get them. And please do not take flowers without letting them know specifically where you're going to go. We have also, I think John Nakahata's here somewhere, I think. There'll be other people that will be able to help, but please sign up. My sister Teresa, she's right up here. She'll be right here, and she'll be handing out these flowers for this immediate area. As you can see, there's quite a bit of sites to visit, and we need as much help as possible. So anyone that could come up, we truly, truly appreciate it. Other than that, thank you very much for coming out on Memorial Day and honoring and being here today with us. Thank you.